Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar focused on the state-facilitated retirement savings programs, commonly known as state auto IRAs, although we will discuss in our program today that there are several different types of programs that the states have enacted in the recent years. My name is Rayna Stoycheva. I'm the Retirement Security Policy Director at the Harkin Institute, and I'm delighted and honored to be joined by our three expert panelists today. I will introduce each one of them briefly and their work, and then we will talk about the plan for the panel this afternoon. Our first speaker will be Angela Antonelli, who is a research professor and the executive director of the Center for Retirement Initiatives at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy. As a founder and executive director of the CRI, Angela works closely with policymakers, states, and stakeholders to expand the availability and improve the effectiveness of retirement savings, investment, and income solutions for retirement plans and programs for private sector employees. In 2015, Angela established and hosts the State Facilitated Retirement Savings Program Network, a network of states working on supporting and advancing state retirement savings programs. In addition, CRI serves as a clearinghouse and resource hub for state-facilitated retirement savings programs. The second panelist is Hunter Railey, Director of the Colorado Secure Savings Program. Hunter works with his board to oversee all aspects of the program, including design, structure, governance, operations, investment management, partnerships, and marketing. He spearheaded the development of a multi-state governance framework that is now the Partnership for a Dignified Retirement and serves as its founding chairman. Before joining the Colorado Department of the Treasury, Mr. Railey served as the Colorado Director for Small Business Majority, a small business advocacy and research nonprofit, where he managed a network of business owners, developed and implemented a policy agenda, and provided technical assistance and resource navigation services. His work experience also includes policy analysis, campaign management, and polling. Mr. Railey currently sits on the board of CDS Finance and Startup Colorado, and is a graduate of the University of Denver and the School of Public Affairs at American University. And our third panelist is Laura Quinby, who is the Associate Director of Employee Benefits and Labor Markets at the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. Her recent research interests include the labor market for older workers, federal and state disability insurance programs, retirement benefits for state and local government workers, and state auto IRA programs. Quinby earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Dartmouth College and a PhD in public policy from Harvard University in the field of labor economics. Her work appears in academic journals such as the Journal of Policy Analysis and Management and Labor Economics, as well as issue briefs that are widely cited by policymakers and the media. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It is a pleasure to have everyone on this panel, and as you will see from the information that I just provided, we have two of the leading research centers who have worked on this topic, as well as the representative of one of the state programs that is currently in effect and one of the leaders with the state partnerships. I would like to briefly set the stage for this panel. The slide with the two maps that we created in policy briefs published in 2022 and the one that was just released illustrates that there has been a lot of recent activity at the state level, and this is what prompted us to reissue the policy brief, including two of our neighbors. The states of Minnesota and Missouri both enacted a state retirement savings program. And while this has been happening, and there is a lot of ongoing work in terms of proposed legislation as well in other states, the other development has been that now that some of these programs have been implemented for close to a decade, we have some data that allows us to study their impact on access to retirement savings, on accumulation, and also on the rest of the employer-provided retirement savings market. And there have been some really interesting new studies coming out on those topics. In terms of outline for the panel this afternoon, Angela will start with a discussion of the work that is being done by CRI. As we said, they are the hub for all the work that's done with the state-facilitated retirement savings programs. And she will walk us through some of the new reports that they released recently and some of the impacts that they have established from publications released in the last year or so. Additionally, in the latest report that CRI released, they look at projections in the future, including what accumulations could look like once we add for the new federal savers match. Following Angela's presentation, Hunter Railey will talk about his experience with the Colorado Secure Savings Program and also the Colorado Partnership for a Dignified Retirement. And one of the issues that has been brought up as these programs have been implemented across the country has been the concern that these retirement assets, when they're accumulated by our targeted population of low to moderate income employees, they may interact with other programs that they're eligible for. And so the Center for Retirement Research released a study on this, and Laura will take us through some of the results that they found in this simulation, because obviously we still do not have enough data to look at these currently, but we can try to make some projections of what these accounts could accumulate after people participate for throughout their career. Once we hear all three presenters, we will open this for panel discussion and also audience Q&A. Please feel free to send us your questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. We will try to answer all the questions that we get throughout the discussion part of this program. And with this, I'll turn it on to Angela.
Okay. Thank you, Rayna. Thanks for hosting this webinar about state programs. Very happy to be with you today. So if we can go to the first slide. Just very quickly, Rayna pretty much covered it, but for folks that are interested in learning more about state-facilitated retirement savings programs, the CRI is a hub for that information. So please go to cri.georgetown.edu at any time. And there's probably more information than anybody really wants to know about these state programs located on our site. But as in building the center over the past decade, one of our primary missions has been to advance and advocate for the establishment of these state facilitated retirement savings programs. So we work very closely with the states. As Rayna pointed out, I've created a network of the states that meets monthly, it meets annually. We maintain a state resource center. We provide technical assistance both through the legislative process, through program implementation, and work with states to help exchange best practices and lessons learned. Next slide. For folks that are interested in program performance data related to state programs, we do have a data page that is updated regularly. We are now at the end of March 31st, so we're getting in our data for state performance as of March 31st. So look for a refresh if you check out that page. But we're very excited because we are reaching and have reached major milestones. One is going to be the $2 billion in assets, which we hope to mark very soon. If it doesn't show in the March 31st data, I'm sure it will show very soon. But we already have marked 1 million funded saver accounts. Next slide. We also track and have for a decade, for as long as the center has existed, we have tracked state legislative activity every year. As you can see, there's a map on our homepage and on other pages of our site. It's updated daily. The red shaded states, and you can see from the legend, there are 20 state programs that exist today. The auto IRA programs, as you can see, is the darker red. So 17 of the 20 state programs are auto IRA programs. 11 of those programs are now open. You can see that there are stars that designate the programs that are open. There are other shades of red there that you can see that reflect other models. I'll talk about those in a minute. But then you can also see with the green, the tracking of the 2025 states. On average, we have about 20 states every year that introduce some kind of program bill. It might be a study bill or a program bill, but we see that kind of movement year over year. We track that every year. So if you refer back to our site, you can see sort of the progress by the markings of those green states designation, which states have bills that were introduced for the 2025 legislative sessions. Next slide. And I just want to move into a discussion of sort of state facilitated retirement savings programs and what the current landscape looks like. Next slide. As I mentioned, there are 20 states that have programs. Many of these programs are auto IRA state programs, and many of them are now open, which is very exciting. However, I will point out that many of the state programs that have opened within the past 3 years. So California, Illinois, and Oregon were among the first states to pass programs and to stand up those programs. They've been open for the longest periods of time. Colorado opened 2 years ago. Connecticut and Maryland opened back in 2022. So in 2022, we had Connecticut open and Maryland open, and then we were followed by Colorado and subsequently a number of other states. So it's just important to note that when we look at the performance and we're marking these milestones, that many of these states are still in their early stages of implementation. There are also, as you can see, and I think Rayna in the Harkin paper that's periodically refreshed and put out on the state facilitated programs, there are these other models that do exist. An auto IRA state, for the audience, if you don't know what that means when we refer to that, auto IRA states are states in which laws have been passed that are saying to employers, you have to take some kind of action. If you don't offer your workers an employer-sponsored retirement savings plan, you're going to need to do something. Either go and adopt a plan, so take on a 401k, adopt a 401k or an IRA or some other qualified retirement plan. If you don't do that, then you at least have to facilitate the ability of your workers to save using the new state program. So again, that has been the way we've been trending in terms of the development and evolution of state facilitated retirement savings programs. Again, it's a requirement on employers to take some kind of action. Not surprisingly, when employers are required by law to act, you're going to see much higher levels of participation and engagement than you would otherwise see in a voluntary type arrangement. That being said, there are voluntary arrangements that do exist. A multiple employer plan arrangement is an example of that. The Massachusetts Core Program is a multiple employer plan. It is a 401k ERISA regulated plan. It is focused on small nonprofits in the state of Massachusetts. And the state of Missouri passed recently a multiple employer plan. Again, it is a voluntary arrangement. They're in the development process and have not yet launched that program. In addition, we've seen other states pass variations of voluntary programs, whether it be payroll deduction or a voluntary marketplace. A marketplace is what you might think it would be, which is the state generally sets a framework and then allows a select set of providers to offer, in the context of an online marketplace, a series of options that employers in the state can voluntarily choose to use. Washington State has had a retirement marketplace open since 2018. However, the state of Washington has also now enacted a new auto IRA program, which is anticipated to launch in 2027. And so Washington State and other states have moved away where they have initially enacted voluntary models. Many of them have evolved to the auto IRA model. An example of that is the state of Vermont passed a voluntary MEP, but has now adopted and implemented and opened an auto IRA program. The state of New York, similarly, it had a voluntary payroll deduction IRA program, which doesn't use auto enrollment or any other features. It's just a plain vanilla IRA. But they had adopted that type of program, and they in turn have also migrated towards an auto IRA. So we have seen this shift over time. And a lot of the reason for that is because what we see with experience now over almost a decade with these programs is in order to take action, having that requirement in place makes a significant difference in getting employer engagement and participation. Next slide. What's also been really exciting with the development of the programs has been the establishment of partnerships. And you will hear from Hunter, who has been Colorado's has been the leader with respect to helping to forge the path and establishing and encouraging partnerships among the states. And so the Colorado Partnership for Dignified Retirement has now brought in 4 states. Nevada is still in that negotiations and development phase with Colorado, but we have seen that that partnership progress very well and led by the state of Colorado. At the same time, we also see a new partnership forged between Connecticut and Rhode Island, and they are currently working out the details of that partnership arrangement, and we expect to see that hopefully launch in 2025 as well. But needless to say, there is economies of scale and efficiencies that come with states partnering together, and we're excited to see that. And over the long term, we've seen, well, in the short term, we've seen the benefits in terms of being able to keep fees and costs lower for these programs, and we expect that that will only continue as these partnerships continue to mature. Next slide. And what's also been exciting, again, I said very early stage, California, Illinois, and Oregon, and many of the other states, again, less than 3 years since they've launched. But you can see just exponentially the growth in assets and how fast that growth continues to accelerate. And again, where it took us to get to that first 500 million, to be able to get to that first billion happened much more quickly. To get to that 1.5 billion happened much more quickly. And so we're excited as we now approach that 2 billion in asset mark. But again, we'll hope to continue to see that acceleration over time. Next slide. In terms of program performance and where we're at, very close. Now, this is based on end of February data. The interim data from March has already told us that we've crossed that 1 million in funded accounts. Hopefully we'll cross that 2 billion in assets. And again, when you look at registered employers and the potential there, to think that you have 250,000 employers across the United States or across these state programs that have, are now, because of the state programs, have ways to offer, potentially offer their workers a way to save for retirement. Next slide. And again, we're just celebrating that 1 million in funded accounts. We'll be updating that data and highlighting that effective March 31st. And then again, we hope to see that with the assets as well. Next slide. And then the next slide. Who lacks access and the benefits of state programs? So the analysis that we refreshed and released more recently, again, is just capturing, while a lot of progress is being made, we still have a long way to go. And when we look at full and part-time private sector workers in the United States, millions of them, almost 59 million of them, continue to lack access to an employer-sponsored retirement savings plan. And we know that they're much more likely to save if they have that access through an employer-offered plan. And then not surprisingly, small businesses in the United States are the ones who are least likely to offer their employees an employer-sponsored plan. And so again, where we see maybe 1/3 of the largest employers who are not offering plans and they're not offering access to ways to save for retirement, again, we see significantly more employees and workers in smaller businesses that lack access when compared to the employees within small businesses in the United States. Next slide. One of the things that we hadn't focused as much on in the past, but one of the lessons learned is when we think about the changing nature of work today and really starting to look at the temporary work arrangements, that increasingly more and more workers, that is how they're making their living day after day. And so when we look at the number of full and part-time workers who lack access, but then we add on top of that estimates of what the gig economy looks like, these temporary contract independent workers, when we add it up, it's a much bigger pool of workers who potentially lack access to a way to save for retirement. Next slide. And why we care about this, there are a lot of reasons why we need to care about it, because retirement savings matters, and we want to have more Americans save for retirement and be able to save for a dignified retirement. Our population is rapidly growing older. It's already a population that relies heavily on Social Security. When 1 in 5 American elderly households rely on Social Security for 90% of their income. And then the costs for all the other federal, state, local support programs that have to be funded by taxpayers to support an elderly population that lacks insufficient retirement income. And that, those projections are into the hundreds of billions, if not close to $1 trillion, just in the next 20 years to cover those costs. So it's significant, and we need to do more, and we need to do better to help more Americans save for retirement and be able to generate income in retirement that can supplement Social Security. Next slide. So the other part of the analysis, so the savers match, these programs, these state facilitated retirement programs, again, helping to reach more small businesses. They're the ones who tend not to be able to take the time and figure out and to afford the costs of offering a plan for their workers. And with that, not only small businesses, but when you look at the worker population, it tends to be more low and moderate income. So we used to have what was called the Savers Tax Credit. It was underutilized. We've done analysis where if we could make that tax credit refundable back into retirement accounts, there could be great benefits. Fortunately, Congress saw the light and enacted the Savers Match. And so what we are looking forward to in implementation in 2027 is that Savers Match. And it's going to be, and it has this potential to be a very effective way to help boost the retirement savings for low and moderate income workers. And so we've looked at this both at the national level and state by state, based on what we know about individual state economies, their workforces, their industries, their salaries, their wages. But the reality is, if you're a worker and you're making around $22,000 a year, and if you only made $22,000 a year for the rest of your life, but you were consistently saving at the level that we see in these auto IRA programs, which is about $100 or $120 a month, you could put in about $74,000. The Savers Match would then boost that by another more than $33,000. And at the end of the day, you could have somewhere between almost 200,000 and with the Savers Match, more than $250,000 that could generate supplemental income somewhere between $11,000 and $16,000 to supplement our Social Security benefits, which we know run about $22,000 a year. So the Savers Match is an exciting development. We look forward to its implementation, and it can be one of the most powerful ways, again, to help boost retirement savings for low and moderate income workers in the United States. Next slide. So if you're interested in looking at your individual state profiles, again, whether it's in Iowa or other states, you can find that on our website, and you can click on our interactive state map and pull down your state profile that has all of the information that I went through sort of at a national level, tailored for your individual state and situation. Next slide. And then finally, Rayna at the top had talked about, and this is just an example of an individual state profile. This happens to be the state of Florida. So again, when you go to the interactive map, this is essentially the 2-pager that you would see designed for your state. And again, we encourage people to pull that and share it with folks, work with legislators and others to help advance and make the case for these state facilitated retirement savings programs. And hopefully with this profile, it can help make the case why it's compelling, why retirement savings matters, the magnitude of the problem, and again, the Savers Match and what the potential of that match will be in your state. Next slide. And as I was saying, Rayna pointed at the top, increasing amounts of research and what's showing the data, Pew Charitable Trusts, Gusto, which is an HR provider, other organizations, and research that's being done that's looking at the trends that we're seeing with respect to states that have these programs in place, the effects of this policy that it's saying employers have to take action. Well, what does that mean? Employers have to do something. They either use the state program, but if they're not using the state program, again, they've chosen to adopt a plan of their own. So we're seeing when we look at California, Illinois, and Oregon and early states in the data that, in fact, we are seeing both the direct effects of the state program as well as the indirect new plan formation that is being encouraged by these state policies. So again, employers and states are going out, and rather than using the state program, they're choosing to start a plan of their own. And we're seeing and beginning to see the ways in which the needle is moving, both in combination of this great sort of public and private coming together and collectively to help move the needle. And we're seeing that in the data in California, Illinois, Oregon, and we'll be continuing to monitor it with other states where we see when we look at who's covered and who has access to ways to save for retirement. We are now seeing, you can see through these green slices, it's exciting to see that a portion of that is now coming both through the state program, but also through new induced plan formation. And I think it's great progress that we're seeing. These are very, very conservative estimates and measures based on state program data and what we're seeing with new plan formation data and modeling in terms of the progress that's being made. It's probably some order of magnitude even beyond what we're able to conservatively capture in the data now. Next slide. So happy to answer any questions, but just point folks to the center at cri.georgetown.edu for more information. And again, Rayna, thanks for hosting this, and I look forward to the other panelists.
Thank you, Angela. This was really absolutely perfect in terms of the key information that we wanted to highlight. And as I said, we briefly summarized some of those things also in the policy brief, but all of this was published on the CRI website, and this is really exciting information. Before we go to Hunter's presentation, I really appreciate the detail that you had about the different types of programs, and I wanted to point out again with the auto IRA, so the states, because the majority of them have been auto IRAs, the programs sort of have been referred as auto IRAs more commonly among people who like us who work in this space. But in terms of the policy direction to improve coverage, the concept of the auto IRA is that once you have a requirement for employers to automatically enroll employees, behavioral economics has shown that that is the most effective way of improving coverage and access. And some of the studies, as these programs are enrolling new employers, new waves of employers, have not been fully conclusive on what's the average take up, but it seems to be somewhere between 50 to 70%. So this is after you're auto enrolled, you have the option to opt out, and yet 50 to 70% of people decide to choose. This is low to medium income employees, part-time employees, some gig economy workers, right, who may choose still to stay in these programs. And additionally, I know that there have been discussions about auto re-enrollment after people opt out, re-enrolling them after a certain period of time, right? And another feature of these programs is an auto escalation in contributions. So it starts with a default contribution of usually 5%. And then every year that is increased by another 1% until it reaches a maximum to, let's say, 10%. And these have been documented both internationally and from behavioral studies of private plans to be really effective at improving coverage. And I'm not sure, Angela, if you wanted to add anything from your experience with the state programs. We can also sort of put it in, okay, what are the state programs considering in the future? And I think those are some of the things, how they're adjusting some of their parameters there. But I did want to make that clarification as well in the design of the auto IRA and why that's the dominant model, right? Yeah. So Hunter, Railey will talk about the experience of the Colorado Secure Savings Program and their innovative partnership.
Thanks for having me. As was mentioned, my name is Hunter Railey. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Secure Savings Program. If we can switch to the next slide, I can give some background on where this program came from, and just some context for the legislative process as it played out in Colorado. So the Secure Savings Program was first introduced in the Colorado General Assembly in 2016 It looked very different on paper than it currently does, but this is really to highlight that over several legislative sessions and through extensive stakeholder work, we landed on what is the current program. Um, so Treasurer Young was elected to office during in 2018, and he took up this policy in his first legislative session as sort of a legacy issue. Um, what we did first was authorize a study board to examine three core questions. So the cost of doing nothing, and by that we mean not a the status quo reigns. No changes to Colorado retirement savings or what employers are doing whatsoever. Just what is this going to look like 10, 15 years from now? Um, and then we also studied the feasibility of a marketplace, which was in 2020. That was sort of the main competing policy idea with auto IRA programs, and then also studied the feasibility of an auto IRA program. And we worked with Boston College to conduct several of these studies. I think two of them were done by Boston College, and the cost of doing nothing was done by eConsult, who has worked with Angela. Um, and the outcome that was what was discovered during that process was that the auto IRA program was considered to be the best available option to close the retirement savings gap, both from an access standpoint and asset accumulation standpoint. And that the cost of doing nothing was going to cost the state of Colorado approximately $18 billion over 15 years. In those $18 billion were going to be redirected funds towards senior services, food programs, housing supports, and the like. And in Colorado, with a taxpayer bill of rights that limits our taxing authority, that was almost certainly going to put us in a position where the choice was going to be between serving senior citizens and folks that are no longer working and paying for K-12 education and kind of core services that we're constitutionally obligated to provide. Um, so the board formed, the bill was passed and approved into law in the 2020 COVID session. The board convened in September of 2020. I was hired in February of 2021. Um, what took place after that was essentially a two-ish year process to procure consultants, program administrator, investment consultants, and design the program prior to launch. So we launched our pilot program in October of 2022 with about 30 businesses across the state. And the program was officially launched in January of 2023. So we're now entering our third year of implement. We call it implementation, but we do an annual waive every year for newly eligible businesses to either register and enroll in secure savings or demonstrate a valid exemption, either by way of not having a sufficient number of employees or having a private retirement plan option. So, next slide, please. So some of the immediate lessons learned from previous states. So we were not the first. California, Oregon, and Illinois, and I believe Connecticut and Maryland also had launched just ahead of us. But most of what we had taken away from the previous states came from California, Illinois, and Oregon. At a high level, and this isn't in the slides, but having a good statute is really going to be the strongest factor determining program quality. Um, so in Colorado, this is a mandated program for employers with five or more employees and who have been in business for 2 or more years. And I'll touch on the private aspects a little bit more later on, but an exempt business can facilitate a private retirement plan, and we have limited those to ERISA qualified plans, so 401ks, 403bs, Taft-Hartley plans, those types of things. Moving downstream a little bit, so governance makes a huge difference here. Having a good quality board, managing that board, and guiding it through a design process is really critical for program success. The big, probably the most important part of this is focusing on simplicity. So, uh, In addition to the cost of doing nothing, the feasibility of a marketplace and auto IRA, we also did some market research on the uncovered population in Colorado. And the market research indicated some pretty, I think, findings that we could probably see at the national level in just about every state was from the employer side. The reason for not having a retirement plan is it's expensive, it's administratively challenging. Um, I own a restaurant. I am not an HR administrator. This is not something I'm going to be able to figure out on my own. Um, from the saver perspective, there was a sense that they don't make enough money to save for retirement, which um, s- digging into that a little bit is there are individuals that certainly do not have the income to save for retirement going from month to month. But what we're seeing in with our program participation is there's a lot of people that just didn't know that $100, $150 was going to make a huge difference if they do it over their working lifetime. But the way we address that is focusing on simplicity in our program design. So a really straightforward investment lineup, and then working with a program administrator that Vestwell that specializes in this type of onboarding, payroll management, and frankly, account management process that makes it really easy for employers to add employees, facilitate the payroll process, and then um, and thinking about that from the government side too was really streamlining our regulations that so obviously we have to add more words than is absolutely necessary to everything, but the core idea that we were working around was we wanted employers to know what they had to do in three basic steps, which was essentially register your business, enroll your employees, and then for those that clear know your customer, fund the accounts from payroll. That's the only, and then to do all three of those on a regular basis. So that was really where we wanted to land with that. And then likewise, because we had provided a simple implementation process with an easy to use product, that's really going to provide us with some cover to enforce this statute for those who have failed to take action who should have. And that's something we're going to be focusing on over the next 12 to 18 months is developing an enforcement framework that encourages folks to participate, isn't too strong-handed, but frankly treats the retirement savings shortfall as the crisis that we believe it is at the present moment. And then the third lesson was momentum is going to carry everything. So continuous engagement reduces costs, and that's a pretty high-level abstract thing. But California, Oregon, and Illinois rolled their programs out in waves. And the direct feedback we received from them was it just increases marketing costs. It's easier to. California is probably an outlier just given its size, but if you have a mid-sized state, just roll your program out in one fell swoop. And then beyond that too, it requires continuous engagement with employers and stakeholders. So what sets public-private partnerships apart from your standard private company is that whereas people are expecting to perhaps run into challenges with I don't know, the help center with United Airlines or Comcast or whomever they're dealing with. When they run into issues with a state-led product, lawmakers are going to hear about it. So you're going to have to deal with that at some point. And we've really tried to maintain that consistent engagement with stakeholders on the ground, both to support our enrollment, but also to make sure that any little hiccups that may come along the way aren't don't come along as a threat to the program, but rather as a problem requiring a solution from an engaged group of individuals. And then the final piece of this is really just to have um, quick follow-up with employers throughout the registration and payroll process. So there's several steps for employers, as simple as we have designed this product to be, and as simple as our vendors have made it for folks. Employers have to enter information, come back at a later date, and then consistently do that. And we want to make sure that we're providing them with the information to stay in compliance. So, next slide, please. So coming out of our current status right now, there's been a number of opportunities as we continue to grow the program. So as of the end of March, we are over 75,000 funded accounts. We have about we're coming up on 110 million in assets under management, and we have almost 17,000 registered employers. Uh, this is a public-private partnership. So we're both working with private partners who are our vendors, who are facilitating the accounts and kind of those core administrative functions and managing the investments. But there's also an enormous opportunity for private retirement plan providers to step in and help. This is a whole of community kind of solution to addressing the retirement savings crisis. And uh, on the one hand, one of the top critiques of the U.S. retirement system is that it's pretty balkanized. There's a lot of options. It can be really complicated. The upshot of that is there is almost certainly a financial product available based on your specific needs, and supporting folks to navigate that in a way where they're getting into a safe product that's going to meet their needs is really critical here. And the reason I bring that up is the two avenues for compliance is you can enroll in state facilitated programs, which is going to be a net benefit for the savers with portable accounts and the opportunity to save for retirement in a no cost solution for employers. But private retirement plans can also step in and fill the void here too. And we've been encouraging a lot of brokers and providers to actively take our materials in their sales pitches. Registered fiduciaries are uh, tend to do pretty well with informing employers on the ground of what their obligations are, and they're also going to be pretty conscientious that if a private plan isn't going to be right for you, we're not going to sell you one, but this is something we may want to come back to at a later date. In that regard, I think it's expanded the role for private providers. So it educates the employers on the available options, selection of the right plan. It supports the employer. It creates pipelines to support employers who may transition to a private option at a later date as their business scales or they just find themselves more capable. And then most importantly too, that example that Angela was raising of a fairly low income worker, you are almost certainly if you save over that working lifetime, you are almost certainly going to qualify for wealth management services or like the asset minimums for that. States aren't in a position to advise on how those funds can be drawn down. And from an income perspective, this creates an opportunity for wealth management professionals to really work with people in their community. And I understand we don't want to sell a product here, but I can in many, many states of Colorado, for instance, and I think the same is true in Iowa, where it's rural or heavily localized, people are going to have different perspectives on what they want to do with their money and what goals they want to reach. And that's just where we think local resources are going to be best positioned to help these folks out. Um, this also helped I think these programs also help clarify the role of the public sector. So setting aside Social Security and the broader federal programs, this program really helps us maintain a focus on closing the savings and access gap. And because we have board oversight and we're facilitating a program, we can manage risk and provide oversight over that. And then we can also ensure that participants that are going towards exempt plans from state programs are going into high quality ones or at least regulated ones. And then we can maintain some degree of policy flexibility with the broader policy goals to make sure that we're not being too strong-armed coming in and forcing employers to do anything, but also that we're making meaningful progress towards addressing an issue with a pretty substantial financial penalty for taxpayers across the board. So I'll go quickly through the next slide if we can, because so we can talk. But part of the way we're trying to expand that is to facilitate a multi-state partnership. So we have almost four partner states, beginning with Maine. We expanded this partnership with Delaware and Vermont, and we have since launched all three of those programs. We're finalizing our agreement with Nevada, and we'll be hopefully having a conversation with Minnesota, who recently put out an RFI at a later date. But what this partnership does is it standardizes the structure, it lowers the costs, it allows us to achieve economies of scale. But most importantly, it allows states that uh, with populations that are probably too small to offer a financially viable state facilitated option to do so at a rate that is on par with what savers in Colorado are paying for. So our costs are consistent across the board. This helps multi-state employers, but this also helps states that just don't have a lot of options right now address an issue that's going to be really critical moving forward. So, in kind of the critical parts of this for Colorado is we maintain a joint governance model. It's collaborative, it's one state, it's one vote, with Colorado leading it. But we've also demonstrated that we can essentially get a partner state from contract to launch within 6 months of signing agreements in Colorado. So I think Vermont's an excellent example of probably, Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably like the fastest from what statute being signed to launching over time. So uh, that kind of covers the whole how we have implemented our auto IRA program. So uh, thank you for the chance to speak, and I'll pass on to the next.
Thank you, Hunter. This was really exciting. I want to make sure, obviously, that Laura has enough time to present, but I'm just going to say that the first brief that we published is when the first state partnership was announced, and I just thought that was such a neat idea for all of those states that didn't have the scale. And then now you have the partnership with Nevada, which when we published our first brief, I was talking to Senator Harris, who had sponsored that legislation. And just like over 3 years, they have it and they're in this partnership, which is really exciting. So thank you for explaining and telling us all of this really critical information from your experience with the Colorado Secure Savings Program. Laura, one of the challenges that have been raised with these programs has been that while our goal is to improve retirement security and decrease reliance on government programs, in the meantime, as people are accumulating assets towards these programs, they may not qualify for other government assistance programs because of asset limits that are in place for these programs. And you have done, together with Carlos, have done some sort of projections on what that may look like going forward. So walk us through what you found.
Okay. Thank you, Rayna, so much for inviting me. So I am going to change tack here a little bit, and instead of talking about the nuts and bolts of the live programs, I'm going to look a little bit into the future and ask a bit of a broader question, which is, will these auto IRA programs affect Medicaid enrollment? As Rayna mentioned, this is a paper I wrote with my colleague Carlos Arapakis here at the center. And next slide, please. So I do have to make a quick disclaimer that this research was funded by the Social Security Administration, but all of the views I'm about to express are my own. Next slide, please. Great. So as we've been discussing, at any given point, a significant share of workers are not covered by an employer-sponsored retirement plan. And while this gap really affects workers who have less education, who are lower income predominantly, it does cut across the entire education income spectrum. Next slide, please. And because of the lack of continuous coverage, many households, particularly those without a college degree, end up at retirement without meaningful resources. So this figure here is from the Health and Retirement Study, and it's showing median household retirement wealth at ages 51 to 56, so when households are approaching retirement, by education for the baby boomer cohort. And what you can see is that the median household with a high school degree or less has $0 in retirement savings. And while those with a college degree do have meaningful savings, these balances are still lower than what we might want them to be to really achieve a secure retirement. Next slide, please. So what we've been talking about this whole session, and I'll just whiz through it, these state auto IRA programs, they automatically enroll workers without an employer plan in a payroll deduction Roth IRA. Workers have the option to opt out. Workers can withdraw their contributions at any point with no penalty under the Roth structure. Most programs set the initial default contribution rate at 5% with some auto escalation features. And the first $1,000 of contributions are invested safely, with the rest invested in a target date fund. Next slide, please. So our question is, will these savings ultimately prevent low and middle income households from accessing safety net programs? And in particular, what we're looking at in this paper is Medicaid. Our concern is that Medicaid has a financial asset test for applicants who are over age 65. And while the rules vary by state and the type of services, for example, Medicaid for SSI recipients as opposed to the Medicare Savings Program or LTSS services, in most cases, household financial assets cannot exceed $3,000 for couples. Next slide, please. So what we're doing is simulating auto IRA savings for hypothetical future households, assuming that a national program had launched in 2019. So unlike Angela and Hunter's presentations, I'm conducting a thought experiment, which is really, what if there had been an auto IRA program that had launched nationally in 2019 that resembles the state programs? What type of balances would we be seeing at the end of the worker's career? So our simulation starts with households in the 2019 SCF, and we project life cycle employment, earnings, and plan coverage based on demographic characteristics like age, education, and race. And then we project auto IRA balances based on participation, contribution, and withdrawal behavior that we're seeing currently in the live programs. So we're trying to make these simulations as realistic as possible based on what we've observed so far. Next slide, please. So it does turn out that our results are pretty sensitive to modeling assumptions, and in particular, one key assumption, which is, do our workers cycling in and out of coverage in an employer plan, or are the uncovered workers always uncovered throughout their whole work life? And so I'm going to actually run this simulation twice to show you the range of possible outcomes. So first, I'm going to assume that all workers have some probability of, say, 401k coverage each year. I'm going to call this the intermittent coverage scenario, and the probability of coverage will, of course, depend on the worker's characteristics as we observe in the SCF. The second scenario will be that some workers gain 401k coverage at the start of their work lives, and they stay in that plan until retirement. I'll call this the continuous coverage scenario. Next slide, please. So what we find is that with intermittent coverage, many workers end up participating in the auto IRA program at some point in their careers, but the ending balances are moderate. So for example, if you take a worker with a high school degree or less, we find that 67% of these workers will have some auto IRA balance at the end of their working career, and that the median balance at age 51 to 56 will be around $25,000. Now, this is for a young cohort of workers, so ages 21 to 25 in 2019. They have their whole career to achieve this type of outcome. Next slide, please. With continuous coverage, we find that fewer workers participate, but the ending balances are quite significant. So again, to take our example of the worker with a high school degree, we will find that about 44% of such workers ultimately end up with an auto IRA balance at age 51 to 56, but the median ending balance is nearly $70,000, which is really an enormous increase in assets for these households. If you remember from the beginning of my presentation, the current median retirement wealth for this group is 0. Next slide, please. But these outcomes will take time to materialize because, of course, older cohorts of workers don't have a long enough career span remaining in order to accrue substantial balances, even under the continuous coverage scenario. In other words, it takes the programs some time to mature. And so to show this point, I'm showing the continuous coverage simulation results again, at ages 51 to 56 for workers who are 41 to 50 in 2019. So these workers only have about 10 years to accumulate assets in the auto IRA. And we see that our high school educated worker, again, in continuous coverage, 44% end up with an auto IRA balance, but the median balance is just under $8,000, so more moderate. Next slide, please. So to briefly wrap up, we do find that the auto IRAs are likely to produce meaningful new savings, particularly for less educated workers who are the most likely to rely on other safety net programs such as Medicaid. The question, of course, is what does this mean for their participation in these safety net programs? Ultimately, this is a bit of a judgment call that's beyond the mechanics of our model, because if households value these services more than they do their new savings, they may opt out of the auto IRA, or they may spend down their balances in order to qualify. And we don't yet have enough sort of data coming out of the live programs because these programs are still so young. We don't have enough data to really answer this question empirically. But I'm going to speculate a little bit. So, our results suggest that younger cohorts of workers will have time to build up sizable balances, and they may be able to delay Medicaid recipiency for a period. But older cohorts who are retiring now or in the next 10 years, they would have a strong incentive to actually spend down their balances in order to qualify for Medicaid or to opt out of the program. And in either case, if we're talking about Medicaid's long-term services and supports, I suspect that households will be drawing down their auto IRA balances to qualify for those services, given that the typical cost of a private room in a nursing home right now is $100,000 a year. But there is, of course, another way. It's not always on the workers to adjust. States could update their Medicaid asset tests to disregard all or a portion of the auto IRA balances to try to balance the dual goals of encouraging households to save for retirement while also protecting them with the safety net programs that they need. So thank you. I'll just end with that.
Thank you, Laura. We have about 2-3 minutes or so for a discussion. If anyone from the audience has questions, please let us know. We did get a few questions sent to us before the event, and I wanted quickly to ask one of them. Sort of Hunter mentioned part of this in his presentation, where some of these projected accumulations create opportunities for wealth management services. And the question specifically, as it was stated, was, as currently the programs are set up, are there opportunities to educate or provide financial advice to participants? And Angela and Hunter, I assume either one of you could weigh in on this.
So I can really quickly. So there's a couple avenues for it, and I would say at the 30,000-foot view is the state programs are trying to figure out how to provide financial literacy in a more meaningful way. But I think that's also been a state policy challenge across the board for even folks that aren't participating in state programs, but just in general. So when folks are automatically enrolled into a program, if they clear Know Your Customer, they will receive a program description booklet, which basically says you've been enrolled in this program. It's going to start payroll contribution, and here's all the information. It is a little dry. It is a securities disclosure, but it captures kind of a high level one. For populations that are where it conflicts with other public benefits, that's kind of been the ongoing challenges, figuring out meaningful ways to communicate to folks that their opt-out is available and you need to be attentive to your own benefits.
I would just add, I think taking it at a 40,000-foot level, in the same way that we've seen over time, the financial industry begin to see the real opportunities that exist because state programs have shown when workers are given a simple, easy way to save for retirement, they'll take advantage of that opportunity. And now we've had secure reforms that have given the industry more tools to be able to go out there and reach small employers and offer them opportunities to establish plans of their own if they choose not to use the state program. But I think more importantly, over time, what we're seeing is as we've brought more savers into the system, some of them will, it's probably unlikely, but for some, maybe a state program will be a primary way that they will save for retirement. But, many of these folks also tend to be younger workers. It's going to be their first contact with starting to save for retirement. And hopefully they're going to go on, and because of their experiences with Colorado Secure Savings, Cal Savers, Oregon Saves, they're going to go on, they'll advance, they'll move on to employers that offer them 401ks. Because of their experiences through the state program, will go, I really need to save through this 401k program, and help to accelerate sort of the understanding of the importance of saving, because we got them saving early in their careers when they were working for tiny employers, and just have it build from there. But what that ultimately does mean for the industry and for financial advisors and others to the issue of this wealth management is, yes, I mean, you can build substantial, as Hunter underscored, and we've showed with something as simple as the accessibility of the Savers Match, you can build some assets. But you can really build some assets over the course of your career with a progression to more robust 401ks, and even if your employer matches. There's tremendous opportunity for the industry to be able to embrace this and the expansion of access, what that means for wealth creation, and ultimately the role of financial advisors in being able to work with more Americans to hopefully manage larger pots that they will have to provide them income in retirement. So there are enormous opportunities potentially, again, with just having more Americans be able to save and to understand and start doing that earlier, and the positive downstream effects that's going to have over the course of a lifetime in their career as they move to other employers and have other opportunities with other employer-sponsored plans.
Thank you, Angela. And I think that's a great positive note to end on. I'm just very quickly going to share that the first time I was in the US, I was a graduate research assistant at Ohio University, and I was automatically enrolled in the public employee retirement system. And that's when I understood that there is an employer retirement system, and there is something to say about educating employees who may be in some of these part-time jobs early on in their careers about retirement savings. So again, a great positive note and opportunities as we continue to see some of these programs being implemented. I thank you, all three of you, for sharing your expertise with us, with our audiences. And I look forward to having this conversation another time in the future, maybe in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Rayna.
Thank you all. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.